I've been scarred and battered, my hopes the wind done scattered. Snow has freeze me, sun has baked me. Looks like between 'em, they done tried to make me. Stop laughing, stop loving, stop living, but I don't care. I'm still here. This poem was written by Langston Hughes, most likely here, in this home, where he lived from around 1947 until his death in 1967. Langston was born in Joplin, Missouri, but he lived many places throughout his life, including Kansas, Ohio, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Chicago. But Harlem, New York is where he called home for much of his life. The poetry of Langston Hughes is at the heart of my newest novel, Finding Langston, the story of a young boy who moves north from rural Alabama with his father after the death of his mother. In Chicago, he struggles to fit in with classmates who tease him and call him country boy. But it is only when one day he makes his way into the George Cleveland Hall branch of the Chicago Public Library that he begins to discover a world he was shut out from in rural Alabama. In his discovery of the library, he's introduced to literature, history, the poetry of Langston Hughes, his mother's legacy, most importantly, a part of himself he never knew he had. When we get downstairs, she says, "My name is Mrs. Kimball. I'm the adult librarian, but Miss Cook at the desk will help you with your selections." Her voice is so crisp and clear, she makes every word sound special. Miss Cook is the children's librarian. Librarian, selections, I don't know what any of those words mean, but I aim to find out. "Thank you, Mrs. Kimball," I say, happy when she turns to go back upstairs. I go back to the shelf and back to the book with the words from my heart. I take it from the shelf, looking around to make sure it's okay. I sit at one of the empty tables close to the window and open the book. I'm going to write me some music about daybreak in Alabama, and I'm going to put the prettiest songs in it. Rising out of the ground like a swamp mist and falling out of heaven like soft dew. I'm going to put some tall trees in it and the scent of pine needles and the smell of red clay after rain. I have to stop. I can feel the choking in my throat that always starts right before the tears. I look to make sure no one's watching, but everyone's looking at their own books. Miss Cook is at her desk, busy sorting through cards. I stand so fast I knock over my chair. Miss Cook looks up. "Would you like to check that out?" she asks. "Ma'am," I say. She waves me over. I stand in front of her at the desk and she tells me I can borrow any book I want with a library card, but first she needs my name and address. A place where you can borrow books, I remember Mama telling me. Before I give her my address, I ask, "Are you a librarian?" "Yes, I am," she answers with a smile. A librarian is someone who lets you borrow books in a library. One word down, I think. 4501 Wabash. She writes that down. "And your name?" "Langston," I tell her. I chose to highlight the work of Langston Hughes because much of his poetry mirrors the emotion of my fictional Langston, who is struggling to find courage, strength, and joy in the midst of his own grief over the loss of his mother. After reading Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration, I was struck by the heartfelt stories of many of the people she highlighted in her book, who migrated north from the rural South from the early 1900s through the 1970s, and decided I wanted to create a fictional character, a young boy who came to Chicago and was able to experience a very different life than he had in the South. As a child, my favorite place on earth was the library. And so it became a natural choice for me to place my character, Langston, in the Chicago Public Library as the place where he finds sanctuary in a new city. Research is crucial in getting the details right. On my desk, I kept photos of the Cleveland Hall Branch Library and a photo I found of a home in Alabama I imagined to be Langston's, with a big magnolia tree in the yard, to remind me of his life in the South versus his life in the North. Because Langston lives in a kitchenette apartment in Chicago, I not only looked at photos of kitchenettes, I read personal accounts of people living in the apartments. I watched the movie Raisin in the Sun from the Lorraine Hansberry novel, which recounts the story of one Chicago family's struggle during that time period. I listened to the music of Louis Armstrong, Louis Jordan, and Cab Calloway, and reread works by Zora Neale Hurston and Gwendolyn Brooks. I read newspaper headlines from 1946 and 1947, and read issues of the Chicago Defender, a weekly newspaper credited with playing a major role in encouraging blacks to leave the South and come north during the Great Migration, to find out what issues were most relevant to the black community. Sometimes gathering information can happen a lot closer to home. Try visiting historic sites like this one, or one in your own community, or simply ask those around you, a grandmother, an aunt, a neighbor, what life was like for them during their youth. Ask them about the games they played, the movies they watched, their favorite dances. You'd be surprised at the stories you can uncover by just listening. That is how I conducted research for my book, Finding Langston. I hope I've given you some ideas for ways you can research and begin writing your own stories. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the comments section below. Thanks for joining me today on Past Present, giving past stories new life.